The various alien races scattered across the galaxy all have their own unique ways of waging war. Whether it be the subtle manipulations of the Eldari, the relentless advance of the Necrons, or the savage assaults of the Orcs, the threat posed by these races are incredibly varied, but all equally dangerous. However, there is one faction who relies almost entirely on subterfuge, hiding within the various societies and slowly corrupting them, readying their worlds for consumption by the race from beyond the galaxy. Though they are most prevalent on human worlds, they have been found in other societies too, able to spring up from a single creature before growing to a massive army capable of significantly weakening or even toppling the defenders of their victim planet. And as if that wasn't enough, they aren't even the true foe, for their uprising is usually a herald for something far, far worse, an incoming Tyranid Hive Fleet. Led by a Patriarch, the very first of their kind to infect the populace, their community of pure strains and hybrids is known collectively as a Genestealer Cult. My name is Michael for Tactica, Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The coming of a Genestealer Cult is insidious, subtle, and often, if not always, unnoticed by the target population. Either under instruction from a Hive Fleet or because of an inbuilt survival instinct, a group of Genestealers will arrive on a planet in secret. I believe that remnant Genestealers from a destroyed Hive Fleet will also act in this way, and you can actually get lone Genestealers rather than groups. Once they've arrived, their mission is that of infecting the local populace, and the Genestealers go into hiding to ensure they can do this without being detected, because, they're kind of Xenos. The first Genestealer to successfully infect someone will then evolve, becoming known as a Genestealer Patriarch, gaining incredible intelligence and prodigious psychic abilities as well as being almost immortal, well, outside of being murdered. From these first infections come the first generation of Genestealer hybrids, born looking very much like Genestealers for the moment and known as Acolytes. We'll be talking in terms of human worlds for this example, since they're the most numerous case and thus we have the most evidence. These acolytes, the children of the infected, will then breed in turn with the local populace, creating the next group of acolytes known as second-generation hybrids. How said breeding is done I haven't fully looked into, but as there's a level of brood telepathy amongst the cult members, I suspect that some sort of psychic shenanigans is involved, and you must also consider that Genestealers, well, they use something called an ovipositor to pass on their genetics. The second generation hybrids still look pretty similar to a Genestealer, and during this and the first generation, a divergent strain known as aberrants or aberrants will also develop, though how or why is unclear even to the cult. Some suspect the warp, maybe just random mutation, it's not really clear. These brutish monsters are far less intelligent, used as nothing more than muscle, kept hidden away to an even greater extent due to their mutations being even more obvious than the other hybrids. From this point, things can become more overt from a cult, at least in terms of public appearance. The third generation of hybrids, created from the breeding of second-gen hybrids with indoctrinated captives, actually look sort of human. They do sometimes have a third arm with a Genestealer claw, but their shape is at least humanoid. It's not until the fourth generation that the hybrids known as neophytes, along with the third generation, are actually almost indistinguishable from humans, and they're actually considered to be very charismatic, though whether this is natural charm or the hypnotic gaze possessed by all Genestealers is a little less clear. From this fourth generation of hybrids will come a couple of other unique individuals, the Magus and the Primus. The Magus is, in effect, the leader on the hybrid side of the cult, second to the Patriarch of course, serving as the public face of the cult thanks to his totally human appearance. The Magus is always descended from at least one psychic parent, making them a formidable psyker in their own right, and they're often accompanied by a familiar formed from the psychic shadow gathering around them. Though getting a psychic gene pool, you might expect that to be a challenge given the common prejudice towards psykers, Genestealers can recognise and be attracted by them, making them amongst the first infected and ensuring there's always a measure of psychic power available. By contrast, the Primus is not a psyker at all, at least not beyond the other members of the cult. Instead, the Primus is a warrior beyond them, usually only created when the time for subtlety has passed. Either the cult has reached a critical mass, or the original Hive Fleet that sent the Genestealers is approaching the victim system. They will then lead the cult in their uprising, combining their natural abilities of stealth and dexterity with weapons and toxins, including what appear to be bone swords. How they get them, we're not so sure, but we'll see. There's actually a 5th generation of hybrids. The offspring of the 4th generation are actually new genestealers known as pure strains, and if the cult will need to stay hidden for the long term, these pure strains will restart the cycle of infection anew. You don't get a new Patriarch, but you keep the loop going. It's not a one-time deal. Between the 4th and 5th generation, a variant hybrid known as Metamorphs can be birthed, though this is usually only when the aforementioned Hive Fleet is en route. Worshipped as a form of living saint by the cult, the Metamorphs display mutation much more akin to the typical Tyranid biomorphs, combining their vicious nature with their human intellect, which is much higher than most Tyranids given their usual nature under the Hive Mind's control. If the Metamorphs are saints, then the Tyranids are gods for the Genestealer cults. The Hive Fleet's like a prophecy being fulfilled when it arrives. The incredible psychic power of the Patriarch acts as a beacon to the Tyranids, and said beacon only grows as the cult expands in power. When the fleet finally comes, the cult will launch an insurrection and uprising, fighting against the defenders of the world to either weaken or overthrow them alongside the oncoming swarm. Once their task is complete, the cult is harvested willingly alongside the rest of the planet, massacred by the Patriarch and the pure strains. Of course, sometimes the Hive Fleet never does come, either due to getting distracted or destroyed. Well, maybe not distracted. Distracted in Tyranids doesn't make sense. Meaning the cult will simply continue to grow, unchecked. It will eventually reach the critical mass that is the ultimate trigger for the creation of a Primus, and thus will simply be able to overthrow the defenders anyway. If they do so, the Primus will lead the cult to find fresh prey, be that in the next Hive City or the next planet. The only way to properly hinder or defeat a cult is to kill both the Magus and the Patriarch in quick succession, throwing the cult into disarray and giving a potential opportunity to wipe them out. However, like anything associated with Tyranids, the Genestealer cult adapts fast. The next oldest pure strain Genestealer will soon become the new Patriarch if given an opportunity, and even killing both Magus and Patriarch is not a guaranteed death sentence for the cult. The first known Genestealer cult identified within the Imperium appeared on the world of Gosar Quintus in the Ultima Segmentum before the first Tyranids had even arrived in the galaxy, or at least before the invasion of Tyranid that revealed their existence. Though it was probably an unremarkable planet otherwise, the rulers of Gosar Quintus, the Trist dynasty, found themselves under inquisitorial investigation for perversion of the Imperial Creed. Though initially the team led by Inquisitor Chagrin found overwhelming evidence of said perversion, the final message stated that in fact, all was suddenly well. Though it took another year for the Inquisition to actually follow up on it, a Death Watch kill team was sent in to investigate in turn, but they were wiped out. Eventually, a second kill team was sent in, led by Ultramarines chaplain Orton Cassius, and what they found was the first of the Genestealer cults. They survived, just about, supposedly wiping out the cult, but they were left haunted by the experience, and what they discovered was perhaps even more scary. The cult's influence was seemingly not confined to Gosar Quintus. In fact, it wasn't even confined to the local system. The Genestealer cult potentially had its talons in the entire sector, a truth as horrifying to the Imperium as it would be impressive to a neutral-ish observer like myself. Though we do not know the eventual fate of Gosar Quintus in detail, much less the surrounding planets, I can all but guarantee they were subjected to exterminatus, as once the cult passes a certain power threshold, this is basically the only way to stop it. However, before that time comes, measures can and have been taken to destroy the cults before they become unstoppable, Death Watch kill teams probably being amongst the most popular ways. The problem is not in the execution of a cult, difficult as that may be. No, the problem is finding the cult's existence in the first place, as the Genestealers and hybrids are all adept at remaining hidden, and the later generations are pretty much passable for human. The Inquisition has gotten better at this, especially as it learns more about the ways of the Genestealer cult, but the hints are still subtle in the extreme, and I suspect that the Patriarchs are, at least if they can, constantly adopting their strategies. Other Genestealer cults have been found all over the Imperium. The cult on Ikar 4 was destroyed by Marnius Calgar and the Ultramarines, along with the infamous penal legionnaires known as the Last Chances during the Second Tyrannic War, for example. Another cult infested the world of Radnar during the same war, rising up in the path of the oncoming Hive Fleet Kraken against Astro-Militarum forces from worlds including Krieg, which we've discussed in the past if you're interested. They were successful enough, even if they didn't overthrow the planet, despite the aids of the sides of the Emperor Space Marines who'd lost their home of Sotha to Kraken in the past. The Tyranids were able to consume Radnar. The world of Gravelax actually proved just how dangerous a cult can be even before it engages in open warfare. Gravalax was a border world between the Imperium and the Tau Empire, and though the Imperium was actually looking to avoid conflict with them, they refused to cede the world. Eventually, a Tau ambassadorial team was massacred whilst waiting to meet the Imperial Guard unit sent as a show of force. Though renowned Commissar Caiaphas Cain was able to calm the Tau down, it took a joint investigation from the Inquisition and the forces of the Greater Good to finally uncover the Genestealer Cult, the Patriarch being none other than the planetary governor. How he fooled anyone I'm unsure, unless he had transfiguring abilities or never went out in public and spoke through the Magus. The probably very, very, very fragile alliance between human and Tau actually saw the Patriarch slain, though it was covered up as being deposed for incompetence rather than, being a filthy Xenos. But it appears as though the cult actually wasn't wiped out. The Tau also used their common sense and abandoned any efforts to convert Gravalax to the greater good, believing it too unstable to hold. So in a way, everybody won. Also, I cannot remember the name of the world, but I want to mention one other incident involving another Death Watch kill team. They were sent in to extract someone who had been captured, I believe an Inquisitor or another Inquisitorial agent, who had been, I believe, impregnated by the cult on the Inquisition's order. They'd recovered her and then wanted to test her to see how the cult might evolve. The world was destroyed afterwards, and so records of it probably no longer exist. But I wanted to mention it because it shows the lengths the Imperium is willing to go to try and stop a Genestealer cult from actually working out. Outside of the Imperium, there's much less documented evidence on the appearance of Genestealer cults, but that's not to say that only humanity has been infested, far from it. Orc Genestealer cults are known to have existed on several occasions, usually amongst freebooter warbands who are the most likely to come across the Genestealers, but they're usually unsuccessful in their overall objective. This is because the orcs, or at least non-feral ones, are actually said to be able to sniff out the un-orkiness of Genestealer hybrids, so it's very hard to hide within a large warband or pretty much anywhere with enough greenskins around. Of course, this doesn't mean that Orc Genestealer cults don't exist, merely that they are much rarer. The only real place you'd expect an Orc cult to survive for long would be in a feral Orc community. Actually, thinking about it, maybe creating a cult would be counterproductive for the Tyranids. Fighting the uprising would make the remaining Orcs bigger and stronger, making them in turn more dangerous to the hive mind if the cult is easily beaten. Still probably better to do it than not, but it's something worth considering if you're a hive mind in waiting or whatever. The other well-known Genestealer infestation actually took place in the Tau Empire on the sept world of Kesimian in the third sphere of expansion. The planet itself had been taken by stealth initially, but it also captured a lone Genestealer from Hive Fleet Gorgon, which had been previously destroyed by the Tau and the Imperium. Experiments by the Earthcast, rather than natural infection, ended up creating the first Genestealer Tau hybrids, though they were seen as curiosities as opposed to the monstrosities the Imperium sees them as. But, as one might expect from naive experimentation with biology one doesn't understand, it did not end well for the Tau. Before long, well, after 20 years, so pretty fast given how long a cult can hide for, Kesimian was embroiled in war and the Firecast were called in. They found swathes of territory overrun, and the war between the accidentally created cult and the Firecast dragged on for a while. Another decade finally passed before the eccentric, ethereal Aun Gol finally gave the all clear, declaring the world productive again. Yeah, I can't be the only one here who thinks that cult wasn't put down and the Ethereal's now a Magus. Can I? There can also be Eldar Genestealer cults, but the Eldar are incredibly perceptive and able to root out the hybrids, so they are much rarer, especially in combination with the fact that the hybrid creation process takes a lot longer. Oh, and just because humans do it, Genestealer cults can occasionally fall to chaos, with the psychic ones able to tap into the warp and use the powers of their new patron. I'm not 100% sure whether their service to the Ruminous powers overrules the connection to the hive mind or whatever, so it may actually be an alternative method of stopping an uprising when the Tyranids come, though only on worlds already serving chaos, I suspect. The Patriarchs in said cults will become known as Genestealer Oracles, having turned to chaos often in desperation and sometimes even ending up possessed. No, I'm not quite sure how that works since Tyranids don't have souls, or at least I don't think they do, but fair enough, just the way it is. Though, just like the Tyranids, the Genestealer cults are about a cohesive whole rather than a collection of individuals, there are a few renowned names and groups within their ranks. Probably one of the best known is the Magus Maravich Tendark, hailing from the cult of the Pauper Princes on the world of Chance's Vale. This is one of only 6 cults officially recognized by the Inquisition's Ordo Xenos, though of course we know there are many more, and it's basically taken dominance over the slum world without having to try all that hard. Chance's Vale is incredibly deprived, and the populace see the Pauper Princes as their way off-world without any coercion, telepathy, or Genestealer infection. As a result, Tendark and the cult's patriarch known as the Star Saviour became dominant over the planet, his sermons promising glories to come, though by that he probably meant getting eaten by a Tyranid. However, Tendark would never see this come to pass, as the Imperium assumedly tried to dismantle the cult of the Pauper Princes through a clean assassination, dispatching a rattling sniper or maybe a team of them to kill the Star Saviour. The Abhuman sniper was actually able to take the shot, but Tendark reacted fast enough to intercept the bullet, dying in the process and becoming a saint in the eyes of the cult, which quadrupled in size. Oops. And by the way, we don't know who replaced him, if anybody. For those curious, the other 5 cults recognized by the Ordo Xenos are as follows. The cult of the Rusted Claw are metal miners on the world of Newsea, still hidden from the planet's ruling classes and believers in the idea that the void will consume all and that they will be liberated by their patriarch. By contrast, the cult of the Inner Worm actually dominates the agri-world of Fleischgate, though they're somehow still in hiding to a degree as they continue to supply the Imperium with their critical farming output. The highly militarized cult of the Hive Cult, yeah, great name, currently besiege 12 of the 13 hives on the world of New Gidlam, though some believe they actually dominate the hive world by this point. Vajovium 3, a civilized world renowned for medical production, is actually thoroughly infiltrated by the cult of the Twisted Helix. They've even been able to contaminate their medical exports with extracted Genestealer germ seed, allowing their cult to spread far and wide. The final acknowledged cult is that of the Bladed Cog, open rulers of the planet Fineminster Gamma, having overthrown a Mechanicus crusade led by Tech Priest Dominus Threncium. The Tech Priest's quest to harvest bioelectricity had led to an atmosphere of paranoia amongst the planet's slaves, and the arrival of a Genestealer aboard a freighter allowed the cult to spread in this very fertile atmosphere. They eventually rose up and defeated Threncium's forces, though the slaves of the world probably thought the new management were worse than the Mechanicus in many ways. At least the Hive Fleets haven't shown up yet. Sadly, there are no particularly renowned patriarchs beside the Star Saviour, though we know nothing about it besides its name, and the patriarch of the cult on Gozar Quintus. The cult was known as the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, so I assume that was the name or title of the patriarch, but since the cult was wiped out by Cassius' kill team, we know that said patriarch will now be dead. So end the tales of the Genestealer cults. These subversive and subtle groups can remain hidden for generations, able to be created from only a single Genestealer. Provided they are not flushed out, they can become a cancer in the heart of the worlds they live on, and when the time comes for their gods to arrive, they can be incredibly dangerous to said world's defenders. Their warriors/devotees are not insignificant warriors in themselves, often wielding improvised weapons or the equipment of the planetary defense forces themselves, as they can infiltrate them to take control of their vehicles and arms. But they are nothing compared to their gods, the Tyranids who often sent the initial Genestealers, and in concert, the two can doom almost any planet. Next time, now that we're done here, I think we'll create something of an addendum to our Legions miniseries and our log about the Imperial Navy. There are 18 or so very special vessels I want to cover, and we may as well look at the fleet of the Adeptus Astartes while we're at it, since the two are pretty damn intertwined. For now though, it is time to end. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.